extent of the federal bailout continuing to grow since the passage of the initial $700 billion bill, what path do you see for affected banks and corporations who benefit from this bill to return to private ownership and control?
Well, I'd be reluctant to have a very short path, given the way that these banks and investment firms have a great responsibility for the current financial problems that we're in right now. I think there should be strict congressional oversight for a good long time to make sure things are operating properly. I'd like to see the restoration of the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 that would keep investment firms and banks at arm's length distance so that people are not lured into investing into risky stocks and bonds when they go to the bank to renew a CD. I think we really have to have oversight, and I don't think we can ever return to a situation of deregulation that came about as a result of the Graham-Bliley-Leach Act that my opponent voted for.
Thank you. Mr. Russell?
Yes, well, I think there has to be certain metrics in place to measure the behavior of the banks, to see how they're relating to the public, for example. In my case, in the midst of campaigning, I was a day or two late with a payment for Bank of America, which received $25 billion from the Treasury, the Secretary of the Treasury. They weren't that kind to me. They increased my rate from 9% to 24.9%. So I think there has to be a pass along of the goodness of the public and the government, and we have to see to it that there are no abuses, like in the case of AIG, for example, sponsoring a trip to a spa with the money. So we have to be pretty strict in monitoring the banks in their path to private ownership.
We now open the floor for questions. Would anyone like to ask the candidates a question? Please step up to the mic, give your name, and...
Yes, my name is Richard Hensel. I'm a resident and taxpayer here in Newcastle. My question is for Ms. Lowy. Congresswoman, as chairwoman of the Foreign Operations Subcommittee, the House Appropriations Committee, you have been a very strong advocate for the several billions of dollars that go to the country of Israel every year. And a large part of that money is used for military purposes in the occupied territories. Manufacturing cluster bombs, the buildup of the military, the walling off of the Palestinian community. My question to you, does that $3 billion a year that you are a very strong advocate for, does that trouble you at all? And, excuse me?
2.55.
Well, I believe it's $3 billion over 10 years. Okay. I think that comes to $3 million.
So please finish your question.
I would be happy to without an interruption. And if you answer that question that does not trouble you, the second half of my question, Ms. Lowy, is this. What military defensive objective is achieved by the continuing expansionist policies of Israel and the West Bank?
Thank you very much for that question, because I believe strongly that Israel is the only democracy in that region. Israel is a strong ally of the United States in fighting terrorism, and it is absolutely essential that we work with Israel to maintain the qualitative edge. And I will say, for the first time in recent years, because this administration has been very slow in pushing the peace process, as the former president was aggressive in doing so. I've met with Abu Mazen. I'm very, very involved in groups like Chaim Saban's forum, where we have Arabs and Israelis sitting around a table. I've been to Ramallah. I've been to Israel. And I was really pleased that Tzipi Livni and Ehud Barak are working very closely with Abu Mazen and trying to create some kind of consensus in the next few months. The Saudi Arabia plan is suddenly back on the table again. There's a mutual interest now in preventing Iran from becoming a nuclear power. And frankly, when you look at the Hassan rockets that have been coming into Sderot, I've been there, when you visit and see the impact of Hamas and Hezbollah, it is in the interest of everyone in the region is work towards peace. And I hope within the next month, before the year end, we can see some progress in that regard. But I do believe that the $2.55 billion a year, $30 billion as a result of the 10-year agreement that was signed, is in the interest of the United States of America, and I am proud to support the Israel-United States relationship and work towards peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
So I'll answer the question with regard to spending.
So I would dispute whether it is in the best interest of the United States to continue this type of a policy. I think that when we send weapons of great destruction to another country, and they are used in a way that harms the native population, especially in the case of cluster bombs, when young children have their arms or legs blown off, and it doesn't really enhance the United States image in the eyes of these people. It tends to make the United States more of a target for future acts of terrorism, and especially in times like these, economic times like these, I think that these funds could be much better spent here in the United States. I was personally struck at one occasion when I think American helicopter, American rockets were used in a targeted assassination of a sheik who was blind and handicapped in a wheelchair and killed. And my opponent, I guess, responded to Scott McClellan, was the spokesman for the president. He said, "This does not lead to peace." And as I recall, my opponent wrote a letter in defense of this action, and it did have an impact. I think the next day, President Bush said Israel must defend itself. But I would disagree. I would think that for someone who was opposed to the death penalty in the United States, that they would also be opposed to these forms of targeted assassinations, which certainly don't appear to be what a democracy would be involved with.
What do you see as the most pressing policy issue regarding illegal immigrants in the U.S., and what is your position?
Mr. Russell will go first on that.
I think the most pressing problem is the inability of the federal government to respond properly to the situation, which is one of the reasons that led me to, as a non-professional politician, to become involved in politics at the national level. I created a Westchester Rockland Citizens for Immigration Control organization because I was so struck by the many problems, especially some of the crime problems, the death, the murder of a woman in New City by an illegal alien who had been previously arrested for violent crime, and here in Westchester County, the murder of a young girl who just graduated from high school who was murdered by an illegal alien who had also been previously arrested. The federal government has been very lax in acting. Here in Westchester, the county executive, Andrew Spano, has repeatedly asked ICE, and with copies of that letter to the local congressional delegation, including my opponents, asking for help getting ICE to come around and remove those illegal aliens who have been convicted of crimes, over 760 of them, which creates a dangerous situation and a costly situation. And because there had been no response, I went to Washington 2 weeks ago when I heard that Julie Myers, the head of immigration, was going to speak. I spoke to her privately and asked her if she could do something to accelerate the removal of especially those illegal aliens who have been convicted of crimes. We shouldn't be here violating federal laws by creating work centers or day centers. We should use the concept of attrition, that when the employment opportunities dry up, illegal aliens in most cases will return to their native countries.